Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about loading data into Exasol using AI Lab. Now, if this is your first time using AI Lab or first time using Exasol, let's talk a little bit about what they each do. Exasol is a high-performance in-memory database that you can use to power your analytics workflows. An AI Lab is a development environment that accompanies Exasol, which you can use for building, testing, and implementing AI and machine learning workloads within your Exasol environment. AI Lab is free to use with Exasol, and it operates using Jupyter notebooks. It includes various utilities and is pre-populated with sample workflows to help you get started quickly building AI and ML workflows and solutions. Now today we're going to talk about loading data using Exasol's AI Lab. And these are the steps that we're going to take today. We're going to start by understanding the pre-built workflows for ingesting data that come pre-populated with AI Lab. We're going to talk about using PyExasol as well as other libraries such as pandas to help manage your data imports. And we're going to walk through the process of loading data from a web source into Exasol using AI Lab. Now, before we dive in, there are a couple prerequisites to get us started as we walk through this demo today. If you're going to follow along, make sure you've met these prerequisites before we get started. So first, you will need an instance of AI Lab running. Now, for those of you that followed along in our previous tutorial, this is going to pick up right where that left off. You will also need an instance of Exasol running as well, and you'll need to have configured AI Lab so that it can talk to that Exasol instance. So we need both of those set up and running, and we need them to be able to communicate with each other. Now, the high-level steps to loading data. First, you identify the data source. Are you pulling from the web? Are you pulling from a local store, a blob store? Where is the data coming from? Next, you need to understand the structure and the type of the data. Is it a CSV? Is it a Parquet file? What are the columns? What's the structure of the data that you're importing? Then you'll go through and import the data into AI Lab. Now, an important note here. You don't necessarily need to import the data into AI Lab in order to get it into Exasol. You can upload data directly into Exasol using a SQL editor, SQL client of your choice, or various other scripting methods. We're going to show you how to use AI Lab today as an option, because if you're running a data science workflow, it helps to be able to use AI Lab to load that data into Exasol. So consider this one of the options, one of the tools in your toolkit. And then an important step that you're going to see today is how we can use the library PyExasol to load that data into Exasol. Since we're going to be using Python and various Python libraries to interact with this data, PyExasol is that Python Exasol wrapper that can help us interact with Exasol in a Jupyter environment using Python. Let's take a look at how this works in practice. So first of all, like I mentioned, the best way to get started is with our previous video, Getting Started with AI Lab. This will take you right up through those configuration components that I mentioned in your prerequisites. That includes configuring AI Lab as well as configuring an Exasol instance to use with AI Lab. If you followed along with that tutorial, then you'll end up right about here, where we've created a schema in Exasol that AI Lab can use as we start to interact with data within AI Lab. And then this is the AI Lab instance that we're looking at here. We can configure it, we can get it up and running, and then we can start to explore some of the various workbooks and folders that come with AI Lab. Today, let's take a look in the data folder. First of all, we can see the various different types of data that we can load. These are just the pre-populated workbooks. Of course, you can go off and build your own workbook and load any data that you want by building your own process. We're going to walk through some of the pre-built data loading workbooks here that can help us get started even faster. First, let's look at some telescope data. So this is a pretty commonly used data science data set. And you can read a little bit more about it here. It's available on free for the public online, which is why we're going to use it today. And we will be using this data here in a subsequent tutorial where we train a model and then run inferences using that model. So this data is going to help us set up for the next step as we start to build more comprehensive AI workloads using AI Lab. So let's walk through the steps. First, we're going to configure access to our AI Lab storage. And in the previous tutorial, you set the password. You just want to enter that same password here and click open. Now, we start by downloading the data. We have a couple utilities that we're using to achieve this. First of all, we're pulling the data from a zip file that's located on the web in a URL. We're going to download that data and then unpack it from the zip file. And then we're going to load it into a data frame from the CSV that we obtained from the zip file. Finally, we're going to specify the columns that we want associated with that data frame. And then we're going to take a quick look at the data frame to make sure that everything makes sense based off of the data that we've imported. Let's go ahead and run this code. You can see here are the column names that we specified, as well as some sample data, so we can take a look and make sure everything makes sense. Great, so now we have the data in AI Lab, and we can access it here within a data frame in this Jupyter Notebook. But now we want to push that data to Exasol. That's the next component. And we're going to go a step farther, and we're actually going to split this data into test and training data sets. Like I said, we're going to build on this data in our next tutorial where we actually start to train and test machine learning models. So let's get ahead of that by splitting the data into train and test data sets. First, we specify the tables that we want to create, train and test. And then we're going to run various commands in SQL, but we're going to call those via Python. And this is all orchestrated with the PyExasol library. PyExasol allows us to establish a connection between AI Lab and our Exasol instance, and then issue SQL statements to that Exasol instance. So here we're creating the two tables, and then here we're populating those two tables with the data from the data frame that we ran in the previous module up here. And finally, we're going to time the whole thing. This just gives us a sense of how long this job took. This is a relatively small file, so it should go pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and run this module. Excellent. So in under a second, we have populated data into our telescope train and our telescope test tables within Exasol. So that's 15,000 rows in the training data set and about 4,000 rows in the testing data set. Let's walk through this process again with another data set. One is good, but two is better. And so let's go back and now let's take a look at a different type of data. This is abalone data. So abalone is a type of animal, and this data set includes descriptive characteristics about different, they're mollusks, lots of different abalone. And this is another very commonly used data science data set. Because of the attributes, we can make predictions and categorizations about the different animals within this data set. So we're going to use this data set in a following or subsequent tutorial as well. So let's get this data uploaded. And you'll notice that the process looks pretty similar to the previous one. So first, we want to run our configuration, and we have to do this every time we start a new notebook, because this is where we contain those secure credentials so that we can access the data and the AI Lab environment. Now the download process looks very similar. We're pulling from a zip file. We're reading it as a CSV after we unpack the zip file, and we're storing that in a data frame using pandas. We're specifying the column definitions, and then we're inspecting the data to make sure the output is what we would anticipate seeing. So let's run that. Excellent. And now we upload that data into Exasol. Again, we're going to split into training and test tables so that we're ready for that machine learning training in the next stage. So we've got our two tables here. And then we have our command to populate those tables with the data from the data frames. Let's run this module here. And fantastic, you can see we've imported both of those. Now if you're running AI Lab version 3, so the latest version, there is a third data set that you can import, and that's flight data. Now, this is a very large data set, and so if you're interested in exploring a larger, more robust data set to kind of test the performance and scale of Exasol, this is a great data set to use. And we've already set up the notebook here for you to walk through and pull in this data. Now, I'm going to leave you all to explore this one on your own and follow through and click through, similar to the previous ones, so we can start exploring with even more data. Excellent. Great job. So in just a few minutes, we accomplished quite a bit. We now understand the pre-built workflows for ingesting data, which come with AI Lab. So when you download and set up and configure AI Lab, you'll have access to the same workbooks that I showed you. You understand and have seen how to use PyXSol and other libraries like Pandas to manage those data imports. And we went through the process of loading data from a web source into Exasol using AI Lab. Now this is fantastic because it sets us up for what's coming next. And up next is going to be running some machine language scripts, building out UDFs, user-defined functions, and starting to create your own custom workflows, and then exploring generative AI workflows, all built on this foundation of pulling data into Exasol using AI Lab. So we look forward to seeing you on the next one.